There it goes.
All
All
right.
right. Yeah.
Hey, Bo, what's up?
Good morning. Hey, Jess.
Jess in the house already? Morning.
Good morning.
Um, Bo, we get to talk about your favorite thing today.
Oh,
The bar
dogs?
the barbell,
I'm just
dogs. Oh
kidding.
yeah. Secondary, your second
CrossFit,
favorite thing.
CrossFit. Yes.
CrossFit, barbells.
Barbell. I do. I love the barbell. Give me barbell movement over running or gymnastics any day, and I will be happy. So
Yeah.
yeah, barbell progression. So not only the barbell, but specifically teaching barbell movements using progressions beyond the 9 foundational movements.
Right.
Yeah,
I thought we were only allowed to do 9 movements in CrossFit. Is that right?
it's the only ones that I do, but I mix and match them to make a whole bunch of other ones as well.
There we go.
So why are we going beyond the 9 foundational movements? We talk about those 9 movements all of the time. So what's the deal?
Yeah, so then the 9 foundational movements, this is going to be earth-shattering for most people, is it sets the foundation, right? Understanding the common movement themes and learning the points of performance of those 9 foundational movements gives us the knowledge base and our athletes the athletic base to then build off of and do other movements. And so today we want to discuss movements beyond the 9 foundational movement. For any of you guys that have been to the level 1 or read through the level 1 manual, you know and see the 9 foundational movements. Then there's 2 additional movements, barbell movements that are taught at the level 1, the thruster and the snatch. And we want to take that, discuss those, not only the progressions that are in the level 1 manual, but then also potential other ways and other progressions to teach those movements, and then also dive into just other movements in general. So, yeah. So
yeah, this is cool. And I'm excited to chat about it a little bit and get your perspective on certain things. And of course, hear from you guys that are here in the comments. This is just a topic that seemed to come up for me with some coaches a little more lately, just in, whether we're talking about the coaches are kind of getting bored with the progression they use and they want to use a different progression. They think that their athletes are getting bored with it, or perhaps they don't feel like they have enough time to do the 7-step progression they normally do. Lots of different things in there, or even just knowing how to craft a progression that might be a little bit different than what you normally use based on time constraints or based on even the experience level of the group, like changing it up a little on the fly for that. So I think there's a lot of good stuff we can dive into here.
Yeah, Jens, I'm with you. I'm a huge fan of the 9 foundational movements as they set the base for most movements, but then also most athletic abilities. Yeah, it's like we continue to harp on that whenever we're on really any call, whether it's Knowledge Pro, whether it's Coach Dev calls, whether it's this, on how important it is to know the 9 foundational movements, know the points of performance, remember those progressions and all of that, because they set the foundation. But with that being said, one question for you. Besides the 9 foundational movements, what is your favorite barbell movement to teach?
Besides the 9 foundational movements, my favorite barbell movement, it's got to be some sort of a pull. I really like the power clean. That's my answer. Final answer, power clean.
All right. Power clean.
Yeah.
What's your least favorite barbell movement to teach?
The push press.
Outside of the 9.
Oh, I don't. The push press. No, outside of the 9. Let's see. I don't know. I can't even think of one. Give me some examples.
Well, there's a snatch, like Jens mentions here.
Yes,
there's
I don't mind teaching that one.
Jerk. I guess here's where I was kind of going with this, and this is always interesting. Which do you think is harder to teach? The snatch? Like, let's go with your favorite, the power clean or the power snatch. Which one's?
I think the power clean is harder to teach, honestly.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah,
With the snatch, and even though that one's technically the more complex movement, and a lot of times the more intimidating movement, um, I think it's easier. It's like
yeah,
the receiving position just to get the bar over your head is way easier to understand as a newer athlete than the rack position. So
100%.
100% with
Yeah,
you. Like I think the snatch is easier to teach, and the steps can be simpler. Um, Jens, I hate to do thrusters. I don't know that I hate to teach them as much as I hate to do them, but
yeah, I
I
don't
can be
mind
with
the
you on that.
thrusters. I also recognize too that I have so many reps teaching the thruster just because that's, like you were saying, that's one of the movements we do at the level 1. And so that just feels so like second nature to me to teach it. So I don't really mind the thruster. Uh, but yeah, the PVC pipe progression with a clean is so challenging. I almost never teach a clean with the PVC pipe. I mean, and I
Yeah.
say almost because I hate to talk in like absolutes. I'm not going to say 100%, but I'm like 99%. They're grabbing a barbell or a training bar or something just to give a little
Yeah.
bit of
Oh,
a load there.
almost mostly because I like my demonstration with the PVC pipe clean is not great.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
and I just don't think you can feel what you need to feel of like pulling under the bar to get into that receiving position with a PVC pipe the same way we want. Now, all right. So we both talked snatch. Technically, we feel like is easier to teach because of the simplicity of the receiving position.
Hmm.
Um, One of the other things I want to bring up and discuss with the snatch, and I think this is a great movement to start with as far as progressions for movements outside of the 9, because with our time on seminar staff, the way we teach the snatch at seminar staff has changed.
Hmm.
It started when we got on staff and we're teaching seminars with the Burgener top-down approach. Then it transitioned to something that mimics the med ball clean from the bottom up and then back down approach. There's some rumors out there that it might transition again at the level 1, but we will
Oh yeah.
see. But with that, well, first, do you remember the progression that we used originally, the top-down approach? I don't know if it was the exact Burgener or what we used. But just in general, what are the steps when you're teaching it top-down? Let's talk through that progression.
I'm trying to remember there's so many different ways that people will teach this. I don't even know if I remember the exact one. But if we go from the top down, it's like push the hips back and go to the or did we just do the dip and shrug?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Is
down
that what we
like and
started
I
with?
think coach calls it like a down and up, right? So
Uh-huh.
typically, if we see it from the top down, you dip into, I think, what would be called a power position, but like a down
Mm-hmm.
and up. So it's just essentially
That's
trying
right.
to mimic that power position or the same dip that we get into with a push press. So it's down and up, potentially then a down and up with a shrug,
Mm-hmm.
down and up with the high pull, pulling the elbows high and outside, keeping the bar close, then a muscle snatch. Tell me about the uniqueness of the muscle snatch.
The muscle snatch is cool because you're really focusing on the speed of the bar to overhead. So you're not pulling yourself under. There's no knee bend, right? Like it's only the upper
Second
body.
knee. Yeah,
Hmm?
no second knee
No
bend, right?
second knee bend. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Then from there, from that high hang position, you can start to transition to the like power snatch where the knees bend again. You get to get underneath it, or you can transition to the squat snatch from there, and then from
Hmm.
there you can work down to above the knee, and then to mid shin, or below the knee and then mid shin.
Hmm.
So that's typically like the top down approach. And what's interesting there is there's a bunch of steps that was just discussed, and they can be done from above the knee. They can be done from mid shin. Now tell me this one you shouldn't be stumped with. Fingers crossed. Tell me the current.
No promises. I don't know.
Tell me the current level 1 progression for the snatch.
uh, this one we do start at the bottom. So currently, the way that we're teaching it at level 1 is a deadlift to the mid thigh. and then it's a deadlift shrug, and then do we do the high pull? Or a deadlift and a high pull? Or does it go right into the muscle snatch? Okay. Yep. Well, I'm adding an extra step in mine now. And then the deadlift muscle snatch. So you start at the mid shin, you do the muscle snatch. We walk our feet out from there and practice the overhead squat. And then we go into a hang squat snatch, and then take it back down to the mid shin and incorporate that first pull and do the full snatch.
All right. So we just discussed 2 different options for teaching the snatch. One's from the top down, one's from the bottom up. And I have talked to people before, and they some people have a very strong opinion about one progression style or starting point versus the other. Some people think that it should only be taught in a certain way and never taught in the other way, and things like that. So you tell me, is which one of those progression styles is correct? Top down, bottom up?
Which one is correct?
Which one is right?
Neither. Both are correct, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's and so well, let me ask you this then. How, when it comes to coaching, how do you wrap your head around how you want to teach it? And in what scenarios would you teach it bottom up? And what scenarios would you teach it top down? Is there anything like top of mind? Is it just a feel for the day? Is it like workout specific? Is it athlete specific? What's your thoughts there?
I think there's an element of time. Like, how much time do I have? Is the snatch the main event of the day? If so, let's maybe spend a bit more time on it. What's the experience level of the crowd? Now, with that, this is the thing that I'll kind of, push back on sometimes when people are like, no, I only teach it this way. And it's this really like complex, nuanced way to do it. And it's like, well, we're teaching general physical preparedness to the masses, like the average person coming into the gym. And so I even say like, oh, I'll consider the experience level of the group. But bottom line is, I'm always going to assume that there's going to be a broad range of experience in any given class. So, yeah, I don't necessarily choose one over the other for like a hard reason. It's just kind of like, oh, we've got more time today. The snatch is really the only complex thing that we're doing. Let's spend a little more time getting these different positions versus, okay, we don't have a ton of time. I also have to teach these other elements. So that would be when I would likely choose to do one similar to the level 1, where I'm just working from the ground and kind of going in order, just to expedite it a little bit and simplify it as much as possible. How about you? You probably have a very specific reason why you will use one over the other.
I think some of that stuff applies. Before I get into my opinion, I'd be curious to know anybody that's watching or listening. What's your thoughts? What's your opinion? Do you think one's right, one's wrong? Do you have an opinion on when you would teach it one way versus the other? I'd be curious to see if you guys would drop that in the comments to see what we've got. But here's typically the way that I look at it. And I think the argument that I've heard is the top-down approach really teaches your athletes how to drive with the legs and produce more power with their legs throughout and finish the drive phase of the movement. And so in my mind, I think of that top-down approach. One, if it's like a snatch heavy day, we're power snatching, if we're squat snatching and it's a heavy day. So to your point, if it's like it's the main event, I'm probably going to go that direction and do the top-down approach. If it's a workout, maybe it's not necessarily a heavy day, but it's a workout that has a relatively heavy snatch in it, I'm probably going to do the top-down. On the flip side of that, let's see what Matt said. Prefer the top-down if the workout's from the hang. Wouldn't do bottom up. Yeah, clearly that makes a ton of sense. Even if from the ground, I'd probably go top down and then finish with some movements from the ground. And I think
I like it.
I think that logic makes a ton of sense. And I think a lot of people, I know when I started, right, when we started, every progression that I could find, and there wasn't nearly as much content as far as progressions online and things like that, were from the top down. Now, when we added it to the level 1 and we started teaching it that way, and sometimes people were up in arms, I started thinking about, all right, when would the bottom up approach be valuable? And what I came up with is, like, if you think about a workout like Randy, do you know what Randy is? Hero workout?
Do I?
Yeah.
I do. Yes,
Remember?
I do. It's 75 power snatches.
And what's the
Or
load?
time. I believe it's 75, 55, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
super, super light. If you think about that workout, you think about that movement, it's a snatch, but it's 75 and 55. It's like, do we really need to maximize our leg drive and the upward momentum on this thing? Probably not. Like, what does that workout really kind of turn into? Um, to me, it's almost like a barbell kettlebell swing to some degree, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like bend over, stand and extend your hips and try to get that bar moving. And I think the teaching progression from the level 1 from the ground up actually really prepares an athlete for a workout like Randy, because that's going to be the movement pattern that they're going to be like going through the repetitions there. So typically, if it's a workout that has lighter weight, higher rep, I think from the ground up is a perfectly appropriate thing to do. Not that the top down would be incorrect, but I think I look at that and I'm like, man, that's a pretty good place where that would make sense.
Yeah, and James threw this comment up here right before you started to make your point just about the touch and go snatches with reps, the bottom up.
Yeah, exactly. Midline stability episode. Like, and what is said about the first pull of the snatch is that it's a positional pull. And I'm sure from your experience coaching, you realize how many people mess that piece up. Like, how many athletes have you worked with throughout the years that are significantly better with the hang snatch than they are with the full snatch?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And you're like, well, that shouldn't be the case. Technically, you should be able to lift more weight from the ground. But a lot of people don't, because they mess up that first pull. So teaching from the ground up can be a way to really emphasize and train and drill that first pull and the positional pull, and making sure that that deadlift from mid shin to mid thigh is putting people into the right position. So I think, to your point originally, there's really not a right or wrong with this thing, or I don't think there should be. And typically with newer coaches, I always recommend, like, start with one teaching strategy and one progression and really try to perfect it and get that thing so dialed in that you could do it, in the middle of the night, like half asleep, then start exploring. But from there, start exploring and seeing what works best from there. The next question I'm curious about is, we've just discussed 2 different formal progressions. Every time you teach the snatch, do you use one of the 2 of those progressions, and do you do it in its entirety, or do you manipulate it? Do you switch it? Do you abbreviate them? Like, how do you teach this thing?
Yeah, I definitely manipulate it, abbreviate it, switch it up, combine the 2. All
Is that like
sorts of
a Missy
things.
Elliott song? Flip it and reverse it? Is that what you
Flip
do
it,
too?
reverse it. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, because again, just like we said, there's no one way to do it. It's not this way or this way. And that even brings up a good point where we just listed the 2 different examples we've used at the level 1s. And that does not even mean that those are the only 2 ways. There's so many other ways that you can do it. And so, why not pull something else in? And here's the deal. And this is what's so cool about the progressions. We just have to remember that every step of the progression has a specific point. There's a specific reason why we're doing that step. So as long as you know what the reason is you're doing it, and you're not just throwing something random in just for fun, which I guess if you do that, that's fine too. But, maybe I'm noticing that maybe I'm starting at here's a good example. Maybe I'm starting at the ground. That's the one I've chose to do. But then I'm starting to see that, like, the majority of the class is pulling early. Well, maybe I'll then add in a step that is from the top down that I wasn't necessarily planning on doing, but I added in just to work on keeping the arms long a little bit more. So typically I'm going to have my progression planned out prior to starting the class, but that is one way I can think of that I've changed it up on the fly based on what is happening in front of me. Yeah. I'm trying to think of some other steps that I'll add in there.
Let me ask you this.
Snatch balance. Do you ever do a snatch balance?
Oh yeah, very rarely.
Yeah. With the PVC pipe, that's really hard.
Yeah. Well, with the PVC pipe when we do it, it's with a PVC pipe.
For
with
sure.
barbell, it's really hard, right?
It's so hard.
When people are not used to doing that and not super comfortable in the overhead squat position anyways. Tell me about this. Is there certain steps of either one of those progressions that you typically eliminate and don't use often?
I don't really focus on the little double knee bend very often, like the little scoop, you know?
Oh, so you don't emphasize that,
Not
right?
really.
So does that mean that you remove a step of the progress? Like that's just something that we talk about essentially.
Yeah, I
at
guess.
Level 1, it's not really a technically.
Like it's not a P. Yeah. Like, well, I've seen some people really emphasize it, or some people really emphasize like a triple extension. Like we're going to hold in the triple extension. Yeah. I don't do that.
Why not? Why don't you have people hold on the balls of their feet fully extended?
Because if they're getting into the right position we're working on anyways, with getting their hip open and the timing of when they're shrugging, they're likely going to be in that position naturally. And so I just don't want to necessarily focus on it, because what I find happens is that then people like purposefully try to find that triple extension, and they end up doing it too early or missing, like just messing it up.
What happens when they do it too early? They end up where?
Like too forward onto their toes.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah,
I see that.
and the bar comes forward, and it just messes everything up.
Yep, love that. Completely agree. Let's see, Jens. I find the deadlift shrug a nice progression to teach core to extremity timing, avoid the early arm pull. Hell yeah,
for sure.
I think one of the other things, so you made mention of not like emphasizing the double knee bend or the scoop. Yep, I think if you're right, if we're doing it right, it naturally happens. I rarely ever do muscle snatches or muscle cleans.
Okay.
In my opinion, it just becomes confusing for our general athletes, right? It's like,
what happens? What is the fault that almost always happens during the muscle snatch that you're running around like fixing?
Well, number one, everybody's legs bend.
Yeah, everyone's still catching it, like doing a power snatch.
Yeah, and then when we figure out how to fix them, then the workout happens and all they're doing are muscle snatches and not doing power snatches, which is what we want ultimately in the workout. Or they turn it into some sort of awkward, like not true muscle, but instead of like pushing their hips back and down, they do a muted hip, lean back, knee bend, receiving position. And so for me, I'm like, it'll be confusing. From my experience, it becomes confusing of when do the legs stay straight? When do they not? People don't, like very few of my general athletes are really focused and care enough about the snatch to connect the dots between a muscle snatch and keeping the legs straight and, you know, a power snatch or a squat snatch and receiving in a partial squat or a full squat. And so I'm like, I want to eliminate confusion. So rarely will we muscle snatch because it leads to more problems than it's worth from my experience most of the time. Let's see.
Throw this up here from Jess really quick.
Yeah.
Yes. It's like going back to that triple extension step. It is so hard to balance on the triple extension. So,
and here's the deal is if you do that and try to, like, people that are high level lifters can absolutely do that. And they could hold that position for, 90 seconds if you want. With our athletes in our class, when you're teaching triple extension, if you notice that half of the class falls off balance and stutter steps, they did it wrong. They're on their toes too soon. They're not doing it correctly. They're not balanced. And if they're not balanced, it's in the progression, in the warm up, in the thing that you're trying to hold, they're not going to figure it out when the actual lift happens. So to your point and to her point, that's one of the reasons why I don't ever teach that either. And like hold that as a position, right?
And like you said, the higher level athletes or the snatch, like Olympic weightlifters, that this is their jam. This is what they do. There's absolutely value to doing these things that we're talking about that we don't really do that often, right? Like the muscle snatch, there's huge value there. But there's just a difference between trying to teach like, you know, the 45-year-old mom that's been CrossFitting for a year, several days a week, how to do a complex Olympic lifting movement the best, most efficient way possible, and working with an athlete who that is their specialty are these Olympic lifts.
Yes.
And it's just two different things.
Yeah, love the clarity there. And Jens, 100%, right? The muscle clean, muscle snatch causes the muted hip in the power position or in the receiving position. And so we try to, I just avoid it. Here's the other thing that I typically will avoid. I rarely, even if I'm teaching top down, rarely will I teach the high hang.
Oh, yeah, the high hang. I don't do that very often.
I start above the knee. And have you seen, I know I've experienced and I know I've seen it taught, and I've seen a lot of athletes that will, like, as they're working their way down in the snatch, especially going through progressions, they will dip into the power position.
Mm-hmm.
You know what am I referencing there?
Well, I'm not quite sure what you're asking me, but I know what you're talking. Like, you're just saying that that's how they initiate the movement, is they'll dip and then push the hips back, right?
Yeah. So it's essentially like the bottom of the dip of our push press, right?
Yes.
Because that's ultimately the power position. That's ultimately in Olympic weightlifting. That's where we want the bar to make contact with our body and trigger the extension of our hips to then propel the bar up. But once again, from my experience, if I emphasize the athlete dipping to that power position before they go down to above the knee or before they start working towards the ground, the primary fault that I see in general is that most athletes will jam their knees forward to sink down to either an above the knee position or even to their pulling position. And so instead of sending their hips back and leaning over the bar and loading their hamstrings and glutes, this, from my experience, gives people an excuse to just jam their knees forward and sink straight down and not ever like actually hinge into the position that we want. So once again, because it causes confusion for general athletes, from my experience, I eliminate the high hang more often than not. I eliminate the power position to start in, and I just have people bow forward and get the bar to above the knee with my starting. And so that allows me to go around and check that position, which in turn reinforces that first pull, the positional pull, making sure that people are getting their knees out of the way as they lift the bar above their knee. So
I see that.
Go ahead.
I see that a lot all of the time. Like,
I see that a lot all of the time.
That people, like, coaches are cueing to start with a soft knee. You know, and I'm like, what? I've just been thinking about that a lot lately, because I'm like, what's happening? Like, why is everyone queuing to start with a soft knee?
It's to get to that, like, it's to get to that power position, right? If you work with any higher level Olympic weightlifting coaches or higher level Olympic weightlifting athletes, that's the position we want to reinforce. Once again, that's the quote unquote power position. But to your point earlier, just because that's the right position and that's needed for an advanced Olympic lifter, we don't have very many of them that we work with.
No, and
in general,
more often than not, if we cue to push the hips back, we're still going to see our athletes like soften their knee a little bit. Most athletes aren't going to push their hips back with like a completely locked out leg. And it just, in my experience, is less people to correct and easier to find the one dude whose legs are completely locked out and be like, hey, Joe, soften your knees a little bit or whatever, than to tell everybody to start by pushing the knees forward. And then now I've got to go around and like,
and then push your butt back,
yeah.
but keep your knees back as your butt goes back, because that usually doesn't happen, right?
No, they start with the knees, continue with the knees, and now everybody's in a poor position. And again, like you said, it's the power position. It's an important spot to find. It's just a matter of that. It's, again, the difference between simplistically teaching the average Joe how to hit the main points of performance we're looking for and get into the best position of the movement, or the other lane is we are going to find these nuanced ways to make already proficient Olympic lifters even better. It's just like two different things. And I'm not on that second road. That's not the road as a coach that I am on. And so
because those aren't who you work with, right?
Right.
If you get the opportunity to work with higher level athletes that are trying to compete, whether it's locally or on a bigger stage than that, that's great. If you run an Olympic weightlifting program at your gym and you've got people that are going to compete in local events, then yeah, all of that stuff is fantastic. We are definitely not saying to eliminate that because it's not useful. It's absolutely useful in the right context with the right athletes in the right situations. And I think sometimes we get caught up following the trap of like, this is how you do it, so you must do it like this, rather than adjusting to the people or the situation that's actually in front of us.
Right. And that's the skill of teaching, right? Like we have to meet the people where they are so that we can best deliver the knowledge and the information in a way that they can understand it. And we're not, yeah. And so if you are a college professor teaching mathematics and you've been asked to come to the high school and like give them a rundown of like the basic stuff that you teach, you're going to change the style a little bit and how you teach it. So I would argue that or challenge coaches that do have a lot of knowledge in the specifics to be able to just look at the people in front of you and change it depending on the group and what they need and how they're going to be able to understand what you're asking, and also be able to look and see like, okay, am I adding a progression piece that is too nuanced and complex for the people in front of me, and therefore it's causing more problems than it is helping them get into better positions.
I'm going to ask you this question, and I would love, I'm going to have you type this into the chat, and I would love for anybody listening or paying attention to do the same thing. But your go-to progression, say you're doing, I don't know, just let's say you're doing a workout with power snatches. You've got other stuff that you're going to teach. So you don't have, like, I'll say you've got eight-ish minutes to teach the power snatch in a class setting. So 8-ish minutes for the specific warm-up. What's your go-to progression?
Are you asking me, or do you want
to? I'm asking you. You can think about it for a second, and then you can drop it in the
power
chat
snatch
so people can see it. Yeah, power snatch.
Yeah, my go-to is going to be a dip shrug. So we're thinking about squeezing the butt before we shrug. Then I'm going to go immediately down to the mid thigh, and I'm going to do the same thing. And then I'm going to go to the mid thigh again, and I'm going to add in a high pull. And then I'm going to go to the mid thigh again, and I'm going to add in the snatch, power snatch from the mid thigh. And then I'm going to take it down to the mid shin, and I'm going to do the whole power snatch.
That's a 4-step.
That's my go-to
progression.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. I'm typing mine right now. I'm going to put it out there, and then I will say it. All right. So let's see. We've got Steven, set up, deadlift, shrug. All right. Set up, deadlift.
Deadlift, shrug. Deadlift, shrug.
Yep. Muscle snatch, power snatch. Love it. So that's like a variant of the level one. Let's see. I just put, mine is typically I'll start with I start above the knee. So it's a stand and shrug from above the knee. Most of the time, rarely do I go elbows high and outside. Sometimes I will mix that in to keep the bar path, but a lot of times it's just above the knee, power snatch, and then full snatch.
Oh, 3 steps, huh?
Yeah.
What's James have?
We've got dip and drive, elbows up, hang muscle snatch, snatch and land, hang power snatch. Love it. And the cool thing is now all of a sudden we've got 4 or 5 different options that were just discussed. So you said one, I said one, Steven, James. Those are 4 different variants that we can use to teach this thing. And we should have that stuff in our back pocket. We should have the ability to teach this thing in a different way. And not only should we have these as progressions, but we need to know why we're teaching these. And so let me walk through and tell you why we start here. I've already kind of mentioned this. So I'm going to start with stand and shrug from above the knee. From my experience, that position at above the knee is what the majority of people get wrong. And most of the time they get it wrong by having their knees too far forward, their shoulders too far back, and their butt too low. So I start above the knee to really focus on the knees being back, shins being pretty close to vertical, and the athlete leaning over the bar, having their chest, their torso over the bar. And then it's timing. So this is essentially like a setup position, even though it won't be the setup for the full movement, but it's a position I want them to get to. And then it's timing. It should be legs and then arms. That's why we do the stand and shrug. We take that same thing with the power snatch to continue to work on that setup position or that position above the knee. Now we're focusing still on timing, but really emphasizing hip extension in that receiving position so they get comfortable pushing their butt back and landing with those arms locked. And then we can tie it all together with the full power snatch. It's just a really simplified approach that, from my experience, allows me to focus on all the things that usually go wrong. Usually it goes wrong where somebody's timing is incorrect, where they start to pull early. So the stand and shrug allows me to work on that. Usually it goes wrong by people not hitting hip extension. So the power snatch from above the knee allows us to work on that. And then most of the time people pull around their knees or keep their knees too far forward at some point in the lift. And so holding two of the three steps at above the knee allows us to focus on that. Now, clearly there are significantly more faults that can happen, and I'm going to adjust to those when I see them and when they come up. But these are the primary things that I've learned in my years of coaching. And so that's what I'm going to work on. Let's see what Cabo's got. Let's see. There it is. Cool.
5 steps. Yeah. And that's an interesting way to even go about creating a progression or deciding what you're going to do, is just think, if you reverse engineer it and think, okay, well, what are the common faults that tend to come up, or what are the faults that I know that I always see? And then you just make sure that you have a step in the progression for the most common faults to get ahead of them. Because if we teach things well, then it's much more likely that your athletes are going to do it well if they know how to do it. And then you're not even going to have to worry about correcting as many things as if we're not addressing it or not teaching it well.
So I know you do some drills like this with your workshops that you teach. So what's your process? How do you help people understand and learn how to create progressions? And we've talked a lot about the snatch. Let's jump into a different movement. You want to pick squat clean, a power clean, a split jerk?
Let's do like something. How
about like a split jerk?
Split jerk. Okay. Let's answer Frederico's question.
Let's see. Do you think that being in a hang position where shins are too vertical and shoulders are too over the bar can result in higher hip forward movement and a missed bar path? I love this question. And you're absolutely right that we can have shins too vertical and shins too far over the bar. But from my experience, more people do the opposite. More people have their hips too low and their shoulders too far behind the bar.
Back. Yeah.
So I do an overcorrection to try to get people more used to using their hamstrings. Now, clearly, if all I'm doing is training that hang position and really cueing people to push their knees back and keep them over the bar, if I don't adjust when they actually slide the bar down to mid shin to ensure that they're pushing their knees out and their hips actually sink, then you're absolutely right that they can either have a higher hip position or they can start with a lower hip and then shoot their butt up to too high of a hip position, which can cause issues. So it absolutely could do that. But from my experience, that has not been the result. Like I said, like most people tend to, in any deadlifting or pulling movements, on the way down, they tend to jam their knees too far forward. And at the bottom, they tend to have their butt too low and their shoulders too far back. And so this is just how I really try to emphasize and work on people using their hamstrings, feeling that hinge position and going from there. you have anything that you want to add to that?
No, I think it's good. I think the takeaway there is that there's no one size fits all, and we're creating progressions and positionings that are going to help most people. But then the next step after teaching is what? It's teaching and then seeing. And so we can't just end after the teaching. We have to then look around and make sure people are in the position we want them to be in. And some people are going to have their hips a little too high that we're going to have to adjust. But we're just trying to get the most bang for our buck with what's going to generally work for most people.
Federico, are you with suggesting the shoulder above instead of over? Are you referring to in that hang position or in the setup, like when they're pulling from the ground? And so when they are pulling from the ground, I want the shoulder slightly in front of the bar. I want shoulder, hip, knee, and I want that shoulder slightly in front of the bar. I know oftentimes with, once again, Olympic lifting specialists, they're going to drop their hips a little bit lower and their shoulder is going to be like right on top of the bar instead of in front of the bar. And although I know that's technically something that is taught for once again, for specialists, for my generalists that I teach in my normal classes, I don't want them to have to stress or worry about the difference between a deadlift, a clean, or like a deadlift setup, a clean setup, and a snatch setup. Clearly, the snatch setup is different because their hands are wider, but everything else I want roughly the same. And so, so in the hang, I'm looking more so for the shins and the knees, and I want the shins to be upright, the knees to be only slightly bent, which puts, more than likely, it puts somebody's shoulder over the bar as well. Yeah. Say, you got anything else to add to that, Kabo? Same, are you on the same page there?
No, that's what I think of. I heard the cue before. I mean, I don't know how accurate this is, so I'll throw it out here. But when you're in that hang position, we used to use this cue at the level ones where it's like, if you think about it being, it's like raining outside, your torso should be protecting that bar from getting wet. Whereas if your torso is too far back and the rain could come and hit the PVC pipe, it's just like a great visual that stuck with me. And so I'll look and I'll see, of course, now I'm looking at, like you said, the knees, the shins, and all of that. But if I see their torso position and their knees are so far forward that they're almost in that power position, but down lower, then I definitely ask them to just lean over the bar a little bit more, push the knees back.
Push their knees back or lift their butt up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
But yeah, and that would be in the hang. That's not in that initial dip power position. That's not in the mid shin. It's just, that's where we want that. Essentially, that's where we're looking for the athlete to be when the second pull starts, right? Like we go from the mid shin to the mid thigh, push the knees back out of the way as we go to stand. And then that position there is where we start the magic happens.
Yep.
Great.
All right, let's get back to your process for creating a progression. Where did we determine? Did we say split jerk?
I mean, we said split jerk. I honestly I can't even remember the last time I taught split jerk. I don't have a like a go-to progression for the split jerk. So this will be a great one we can walk through.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was gonna say I want to learn your framework more so than your progressions.
Yeah, and so what we can start doing is we can either start by one of the drills I've been doing lately, and I got this actually from Pete Shaw, one of our coach development coaches with Affiliate U and Best Hour, is starting reverse engineering it and starting with the faults. So let's list all the faults we could possibly see, all the different ways. And of course, this is a drill, right? Like it takes a little bit of time to do it, but it's just a way to really think through why it is you're creating the progression the way you're doing and just making sure you're looking for the correct things. So if we list all of the faults of the split jerk, right?
Yeah, team, if you guys want to drop any of those in the comment, we would love to see that.
Yeah, just and think split jerk specific too. Obviously there's going to be faults like the bar path, right? Like the bar going around the head, but yeah, like a lack of hip extension. Was that you, Todd?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, good job. Good job. The foot, Yeah, the
Ooh,
kickstand, the kickstand.
I'm assuming the kickstand. I think we can all visualize this. This is the person that doesn't actually split. They just kind of like turn one foot back into the side. Is that the kickstand where they don't actually like split?
So I or is the kickstand where like the front leg doesn't bend into a lunge and it remains straight? Maybe either way, a receiving position, like the foot position on the receiving position, is messed up, right? Yeah, leg straight, narrow catching stance, says Jason. Catching the bar too forward, maybe
Yeah,
a lack of active shoulder, right? Like a bent, catching with the bent arms could be one. Timing,
torso in the dip.
torso in the dip. Okay, so we go through and we list all the different things. Well, now we can pair each one of those with, and I kind of did it with the receiving position, but you pair each one of those with the point of performance that you're looking for. So while there are several different things potentially that can go wrong with the feet and the legs in that receiving position, ultimately that leads us back to, okay, well, what do we want to see? And so we've got to then take that point of performance and teach our athletes how to do it, how to get into the best position. So with, we want the hip extension, we want proper torso position in the dip, we want core to extremity, right? So the hips need to open before we start to press ourselves under. We need to make sure that we catch it with locked out arms with our feet in the proper position. And so now we have this list of all of the main players that we're looking for. And we can even, put it in order, what the order of operations are. And then just one step at a time, one point of performance at a time, we can create a teaching progression. And the key there is that we as coaches know what it is we're focused on teaching in that step, and that we're telling our athletes how to do it. So, I mean, a simple example for hip extension, taking it back to like the level 1 progression, even just for the push jerk, is the very first thing that we ask our athletes to do is just jump and land. And the purpose is why, Todd, like what's the jump and land for?
Yeah, it's for hip extension. And so if we're going to take that and think about how that applies in a split jerk, you can kill two birds with one stone here.
Exactly. Yeah.
Jump and land to work on the jump, lands on hip extension, and now the land allows people to start working on that or the leg split, right? The receiving position,
the foot position and the catch
of the foot. And the value of a jump and land, and when we're talking about this, are we going to be holding something? PVC pipe, barbell? What's your thoughts?
I mean, maybe. I mean, so if you choose to hold the PVC pipe just here, fine. Typically, I don't even have them hold the PVC pipe. Like that's a level 1 push jerk progression. If we're just focusing on that hip extension and receiving position, I'm just going to have my athletes with their hands literally just like hanging out by their sides. So they don't even have to worry about an add-on of complexity of like what's happening with the hands while we're really focusing more on the lower body.
Yeah. And I think especially for a movement like a split jerk that probably doesn't show up too often in classes, I love that. So it's like, to your point, we're going to eliminate, this is really, the jerks are the only movements that we eliminate something in our hands, the bar, the PVC pipe, the medicine ball, any of that kind of stuff, because of the true like jump and land and just the complexity of what's going on. And so, hey, if we put the bar down and we're just having people jump and then land in that split position, whether their hands are at their side or even their hands are at their shoulders, so they can start to feel what this feels like. I think there's a ton of value there. And now as a coach, yeah, I like Jason says it, hands on the shoulders. That's where I typically start as well, but still nothing in the hands. Now as a coach, I know what I'm focusing on. When I say go, I'm going to look at one person. I'm going to look at their legs and see if they hit hip extension. So the hips, the knees, do they get in a straight line? And then when they land, I'm going to hold them in that position. And now I get to scan multiple athletes and tell me, what are you looking for in that receiving position? What are some of the things that go wrong in a split jerk?
Yeah. And this is where the value of starting that reverse engineering, where we've already started by talking about what potentially can go wrong. So now I already know some of the things that I'm looking for, right? the catch is too narrow. Like
Cool.
we're landing on a tightrope instead of like railroad track.
So those are two different things, right? Feet, one right in front of the other. That's not ideal. We want a little bit of separation there.
Yeah.
Too narrow would potentially be like they're not actually like creating enough space between their legs to sink down and get underneath the bar, right? I see that with two things.
Yes. And I was like picturing narrow being like close together, but yes, narrow could also be close together the other way, right? Front to back and side to side. So two different faults there just with the word narrow. What does the lunge position look like? Is the back leg completely straight? Do we have a bend in it like we're supposed to?
What does the front leg look like? Is somebody on their toes and their knees pushed way past their toes? Or is their front foot flat, their shin vertical? And that, like, usually a front shin that's vertical and weight in the heel is gonna have to mean that the back knee is bent and that the athlete's sunk down. Typically what you'll see is the two things combined, where the back leg is straight and the front foot is short and the knee is forward, right? Do you see that?
Yes. Back leg straight. Very common. Very common. And so all of those different things we're looking for, because we've already determined that those are the faults that we potentially can see and that happen most often, like most common receiving position faults. And so because we are using that step of the progression and the only things we're focusing on is, hey, the dynamic hip opening and then sticking the landing and holding them in that landing, then we can spend that time making corrections on people's foot positionings and getting them to find that better landing position that then is going to continue to carry over as we keep adding steps and complexity onto the progression.
Yep. All right. So that means that we would start the progression with a jump and land in the split position.
Okay.
Could be hands at the side, or I agree with, I think James said it, where hands at the shoulders, or Jason said it. Hands on the shoulders. I would probably start there just to streamline it a little bit. What happens next?
Next, we can start to add the arms, like, okay, we're going to now do essentially the split jerk, but without the PVC pipe. And so the new focus point there, what would your focus point be there, Todd, if we added that in?
So it's going to be twofold, more than likely. It's going to be timing, but probably, and that'll probably be secondary to what Jess was talking about of people do wrong, is like, I want them to focus on landing with their arms locked. So everything else that we just worked on needs to happen, meaning they need to extend their hips and land in the partial or in the split position, essentially like a partial lunge. But now I want them to do so where the timing is correct. They punch their arms after their hips extend. And I really want to focus on, by the time their feet hit the ground, those arms are locked. So we'll be surprised at how many people that can nail the jump and land with their hands just at their shoulders. As soon as they have to press their arms and they're thinking about their arms, their legs mess up. So we're going to have to reinforce and double check that. And then
so we're holding in that catch position again, holding in the receiving position.
Sweet. Then we do that. What happens after we've finished that progression step? What are we going to do next?
At that point, I would likely have them grab their PVC pipe, and now we're going to do the split jerk with the PVC pipe. What's Jay say? Press while in the split. Go ahead. Todd.
So this is great. So essentially what we just covered was a 3-step progression, a streamlined version. Hey, we're going to jump and land in the split with our hands at our shoulders. We're going to jump, punch, and land. No barbell in our hand. And then we're going to do the full movement. So if we've got a streamlined class and we've only got a limited amount of time to do it, I think we can accomplish the task there. Now, if we've got a day where, say, the split jerk is like, it's a heavy day and that's our primary focus, we're going to do that. And we're going to spend 20 minutes working up to a heavy single or whatever it is in the split jerk. Now, all of a sudden, we've got some other options there. Now we can dig into a little bit more nuance. And so if that's me, and that's my go-to, is that 3-step one when it's in a workout or something like that, if I've got a little bit more time, I think what James calls out here is a cool option. I would probably like add a little a few more steps on the front side of this, which would potentially be first just like getting people's feet into that receiving position, teaching them, like going through some drills to figure out which foot should go forward and which one should go back, teaching people just to step into that receiving position and feel what it's like to bend their knees and sink down and kind of stand up, so they can kind of start to practice and calibrate like the down and up receiving position that we want. Then, to James' point here, we could grab a barbell, get it in the rack position, step them into that split, have them sink down, and then press the bar overhead to feel what it's like holding weight, and either do multiple presses or just hold it overhead and sink down, something like that. And then we could go back to that progression. So now it's like 2 or 3 extra steps on the front end to really build the comfort and the technique in that base, that receiving position, and then add the jump on later. And I think that's the cool thing of having this framework and this understanding of what are the points of performance, or what are the common faults in these movements, and then now how can I build my progressions on that, and when is it appropriate to add more or take stuff away, what situations am I going to do that in. And I think that shows just a little bit higher level understanding of this stuff, and that's what can make your sessions overall a little bit more powerful, because then you don't have to do it this way all the time. And a lot of times it's like, we as coaches, I know I was like this when I started, it's like I just knew what the progression was. This is how somebody else taught it, so this is how I taught it each and every time. And that could lead to issues depending on the day, depending on the thing. If I've got a class that has a bunch of stuff going on and I'm trying to do a 7-step progression, well, no wonder I ran over time and didn't have a cool down and things like that. So anyways, any other thoughts on when you add or take away?
Yeah, I like that. I mean, what we talked about towards the very beginning of the call, that's the main event. You have the time, and you can spend a little bit more of that time digging into things, thinking about the areas of the movement that are very specific to that movement that we don't often get to practice. I think that's a great guideline to where to put the focus on. So for this specific example, it's that split position, and it's the overhead in the split position, and it's getting into that foot positioning that people just aren't used to, and having weight overhead while we're there. The speed in which you can go, from the hip width to the split. I like it. And we should also just recognize and be able to take a longer progression, shorten it into 3 steps, 4 steps, and not lose the main points of performance that we still want to see. And I think a good example of that you gave was when, I've lost it now. There was like a 2-fold one where it's like, okay, now we're going to look for this and this. And that's what you can continue to think of. If you're watching a step in the movement, it's like, okay, is there a way to take two of these main points of performance and put them together in this one progression step, but still realistically be able to tell your athletes how to do it and work on both. And oftentimes that happens when you can hold them in a static position for one of them. So they can think of one thing during the movement, and then you hold them and they're thinking of something else when their brain gets to slow down for a second and just be in that static hold.
Yeah. Yep. I think James, you and I both, I think all of us are still like, this is one of those skills that can never be perfected, right? The more options that we have to teach things, the better off we're going to be. The more ability and understanding of the movements, the more we're going to be able to manipulate that stuff and something to work on. I know you and I talked about this week a little bit. If you guys want a resource to go and see some of that, number one, go to the knowledge. There's a lot of good content in there, and we cover progressions, and there's examples of Cabo and myself teaching movements to actual live classes, and you can look at the progressions that we use. But there's also the teaching movement course on CrossFit.com that once you complete that course, there's a list of progressions, different movements in a number of different versions of progressions to get you to that full movement. Omar makes a point here. So 5 or less steps for progression, right? Keep it simple. What do you think, Cabo? Is that an absolute 5 or less?
It's not an absolute, but I think it's a great guideline. I think it's a great guideline.
I completely agree with that. I think
yeah.
more often than not, 3 to 5 can accomplish the task. There's certain movements where maybe a couple more steps and a couple potential situations where maybe some more steps are useful. With that, team, looks like we're up at the top of the hour. As always, a pleasure. Enjoyed the comments, the chat, the interaction. Keep that stuff up. Once again, if you guys want more of this content, the knowledge is where you can find us. We've got the knowledge daily where you get access to all of our videos and content that we put out. We put out new videos daily. The Knowledge Pro, you can get access to us and our lessons and calls a few times a week where we get to chat and discuss this stuff in greater detail. Coach development, all of our content and our 26 lessons, along with over 13 calls a week where you get access to all of us, seminar staff, level 4 trainers, flow masters, all of that kind of stuff. You guys can get that there if you're an affiliate owner. And quick reminder, we got Affiliate Con coming up. October is going to be here before you know it, Kabo.
It is. It's almost July.
Yeah, it's almost July. You're going to dress up. You're going to go Halloween costume to Affiliate Con since it's in October?
Of course.
No.
Are you not? Aren't we all?
Didn't we talk about this last time? You've locked in Matthew McConaughey. Is he going to be there?
I'm waiting to hear back from his rep.
Okay.
But maybe.
Okay.
I can't promise it. I do know that we've got a pretty rock star group of people that we're getting more and more people secured and lined up by the day. I'm still hoping for Matthew McConaughey. If anyone listening can make that happen,
let's do it.
Please do so. Yeah.
Last reminder, team, early bird pricing ends on Monday, June 30th. So this is the weekend to do it. Let's make that thing happen. As always, pleasure, Kabo. We will talk to you next time. Team, thank you so much. We'll see you guys next week.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you for checking out this episode of the Best Hour of Their Day podcast. Now, if you're a coach who wants to coach more effectively, impact your members, and advance your career, then the Knowledge Pro is the next step. Inside, you'll get hundreds of coaching videos, weekly calls with level 4 coaches, and direct feedback on your coaching. From homework reviews to full class breakdowns, we do it all. This is the best way to grow as a coach and take your skills to the next level. Now you can join the Knowledge Pro at besthouroftheirday.com/the-knowledge. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen. Now keep coaching, keep improving, and we'll see you next time.